a lot of people are going to like it. A lot of people are going to dig it if it's genuine and it's coming straight from your heart. Yeah.
Welcome to the Gig Boss Podcast, where musicians go to learn how to navigate the new music economy. My name's Adam Meckler, and it's my mission to get you the tools to have a thriving career in music. And to that end, we've got an app called Gig Boss that's free on iOS and Android. It's a way for you to create groups, create events, check out your scrolling chronological feed of gigs, click on a square, see all the details, click on a phone number, text or call, click on an address, pull up Uber, Lyft. It's sweet, and lots more is coming. Today, I'm talking with Caroline Davis, who's become a friend over the years. She came out to Michigan Technological University, where I run the jazz program, and she was the guest artist for us last spring. And back then, I was thinking, man, I got to get her on the podcast, but it was a busy stretch, and we didn't do it. And recently, we teamed up and did a show in Madison with my new trio, Supercell, and her band, My Tree, and it was a great show. It was awesome to hear My Tree, something completely different than what I was really familiar with in Caroline's music. I really kind of fell in love with her saxophone music, her sort of modern jazz stuff, reaching back to her Heart Tonic album, which we didn't talk about a lot, but it's a really amazing record. It's been super influential on me. And we talked a little bit about her new record, Portals, and how she funds her albums, a little bit about gender in music, and this is just an awesome conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. Here we go.
Oh, thanks for wearing the My Tree shirt.
Yeah, I was gonna say I got my My Tree shirt on. I was ready. I actually reached for it this morning, and then I went, oh yeah, I'm talking to Caroline. So
cool.
Perfect. It was a natural. We're reaching for the My Tree shirt.
Yay.
Yeah, I really enjoyed hearing you guys in Madison. That was super fun.
That was such a fun show in general. I loved your set. It was so good, and all the stories you shared with everyone.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. It's we've got a record coming out December 2nd that we recorded in Chicago. And we just
Where was that?
recorded a set. It was at Luke Polipnik's place.
Oh, cool.
You know Luke, the guitar player?
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't know he had a recording spot, though. That's really cool.
He doesn't. It was, what we did was, he has like an apartment that used to be a corner store in Chicago. And he just like cleared out his living room, and we put a backdrop and put the band in the living room, and then we put chairs and couches around, and we had like a bar, and we had a dude that was like selling a bunch of cannabis items, and so there was like some vendors there, and then there was a bunch of our friends and family, you know, hanging out for the session.
Nice.
Yeah, so it was filmed, and you know, we're trying to figure out which singles to release and all that stuff now, and writing press copy, you know, all the fun stuff.
That's cool. Live recording.
Yeah, so live recording. We just recorded another set in Minneapolis on the last run, the run that we teamed up with you guys in Madison on.
Nice.
I guess we're going. How did My Tree, like, so for me, like, I found you through your album Heart Tonic. Somebody in Minneapolis was like, you should really check this out. It's got Marquise Hill on it, and Caroline is amazing. And I was like, okay. And I started listening to it, and I really just like fell in love with your music. And I slept on Portals way too long, P.S. I've been listening to that a bunch. It's so great. So, like, to me, like, that stuff and My Tree is, like, that's pretty, like, seemingly the only two things that are the same, or that, like, you were one of the artists responsible for making those things. So, like, how did My Tree come about, and is your approach different there than it is with your other stuff?
Yeah. I was living in Chicago, and, you know, as you know, I was living in Chicago for 8 years. And during that time, I moved there with my partner at the time. And at the moment that I was starting to feel like I wanted to write lyrics and songs, I started feeling like I didn't want to be in that relationship anymore.
Oh, wow.
And it was really a part of that, the beginning of that band, and the beginning of the feelings that I was having. And it was also part of me reading this book by Pema Chodron, which I'm sure you've heard about and many people have heard about, which is called When Things Fall Apart.
Yeah, I have. I haven't read that. I'm gonna write that down. So.
Oh yeah, it's like one of those books that I just keep coming back to because things just fall apart a lot, and so just learning how to traverse the landscape. And she wrote about the concept of Maitri in her book. And that's a Sanskrit word that just means loving yourself enough so that you can also feel the love from other people, and which is something that we all struggle with. But it's so useful to relationships. And I think that I was really going through it, and I needed to learn how to love myself better through these songs. So I started writing these lyrics, and I'm like, well, I can't really sing. So
which is not true.
I did this gig with Rob Clearfield duo, and he was just so nice. He was so down. Like, yeah, I'll play your songs while you sing your songs. And we played at this bar, the Serbian Cultural Center, and I played this little 20-minute set. And this guy, who I'm sure you know of, this dancer Charles Joseph Smith, he came. He's this wonderful musician and artist and human being who comes to all the shows in Chicago. And he came to the show and he was dancing. And at one point, he kicked over Rob's music stand. And then he was dancing. And then another point, all this change started falling out of his pocket. Just like the whole thing. And that was my first Maitri gig. And so just all the memories of that. Coupled with the, sort of the issues I was going through and trying to find myself again. That's how the band came about. And Rob Clearfield played in that iteration with Charles Rumbach and Matt Eulery. It was a very different band back then.
Yeah, wow.
My friend Neek, who's a wonderful rapper MC in Chicago, I met him at a jam session around the corner from where I lived. And I was like, I would really love to work with you on anything you need saxophone on. I'll play on it. And so I started doing stuff for him, and he did a couple songs on that first record, which I just put out by myself. And then when I moved to New York, Ben was interested in continuing that project with me. And so then we started writing songs together, and that's where we are now.
Yeah, cool. It's great stuff. I really enjoyed it. You sort of alluded to this, but I wonder if there was some kind of mental barrier that you had moving from, because you're such a prolific saxophonist and composer, moving to singing, essentially. Like, and I think a lot of you don't have yourself listed as a singer in your bio on your website. There's like certain things. It's like, is that purposeful that you left that out? Did you have to go through a process where you were like, okay, I can do this, and it's still me, and I feel whatever, I don't know, like I'm expressing myself the way I need to.
That's so interesting. And I had this conversation with my students the other day in the jazz and gender class at the new school. We were talking about Karen Carpenter of the Carpenters, and how she was an incredible drummer. Yeah, exactly. And like, you look her up on Google and it doesn't say drummer, it says singer. Yep. And so I was just thinking about that with respect to myself. And I was literally just thinking about this. I'm glad you brought it up. But I don't put that in my bio, and I should, because it's something that I take so seriously, and I practice singing so much. And it's such a part of my vision for me as an artist. But I should start to do that more and incorporate me saying that. And I think it's been also like when I show up to a gig, like I literally showed up to a gig the other night, Sunday, and the sound person was like, so I'm assuming you'll need a mic for singing. And I'm like, I'm playing saxophone. And that happens to me all the time. And I think that it's very much tied to my gender, although I don't want to believe that. But I think it is. And then, so I have this sort of block, as you said, and it's this weird thing, but I do really work on singing. And so I should be super, I am very proud of that. So I should be like public and putting it in my...
But there is a stereotype in there, and there are assumptions made, and it's like we need more women instrumentalists on the scene, and I feel like that's something that we need to cultivate at starting at the high school level, just like cultivating more female identifying musicians, getting them in positions of power, encouraging. You know, it's like because we have such a drop off between, I mean, even between high school and college. I was just talking about this with somebody because I do a lot of guest artist gigs at high schools, and almost every high school I go to, it's like 50% of the band are female identifying. And then you get to the college level and there's this huge drop off. And then when you get to the professional level, obviously there's so many amazing female artists in the world. But there's this drop off, you know, and I don't know, I feel like that part of that falls on the educators.
Yeah, I really struggle to understand why that is. The data definitely shows there's a drop off. Absolutely. At a certain age. And it's really something I think could be important to is talking to, I mean, I hate the word girls, but let's talk to young girls, you know, let's talk to them and see what it is about the vibe that makes them want to quit, I guess. Because there is a large group of younger girls who take an interest in the music and then something happens. I don't know. I'm not sure. And I don't even know if I have enough levity to say that. So, but I do know that it's shown in, you know, quantitative numbers that happens. So you're totally right.
Yeah.
And I wonder what that's all about. Yeah, I'm not sure because I see programs making a difference in trying to make the teachers a more equitable, you know, group of people. So
yeah, and that's when you see yourself in it, right? Then you're more likely to hang in there.
Yeah,
too. As a representation, you know, it's just like as a basic general rule. It's like let's get more people represented in the education system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You released... Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say one more thing is that I think it's important to teach the young ones that there were people who identified as women or people... I was just talking about Gladys Bentley, who was this performer back during the Harlem Renaissance. And Langston Hughes used to go and see her perform all the time. And she used to wear like men's clothing. And she wasn't trying to convince anyone that she was a man. She made fun of high culture. She was a performer, you know, and she had enough money to live on Park Avenue, $300 a month, an apartment for $300 a month. And she was really successful. She recorded for OK Records and she toured all over the place. And she was made fun of because of her cross-dressing or whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
And she might have identified as non-binary, you know, if she were living today. I don't know. That's kind of presupposing something. But, you know, she was like doing her thing. And then at some point, she appeared on the Groucho Marx show in this very feminine dress. And she wrote an article for Ebony magazine saying, "I've been cured. Like, I'm a woman again." That's what the article said.
Whoa.
Yeah, and it's insane because, she was a jazz musician and she was a performer in this music, and we don't know about her, but there was this moment in time, I don't know what happened, but obviously something happened. She either felt so eschewed from the community that she changed and went back, and she even was like, I even took hormones, and like it was deep. If you read the Ebony article, I mean, it's very deep what happens to people. It's almost similar to this situation with this documentary where these people have been cured of their gayness.
Yeah. I was just going to say, like, I went to Bethel for a year in Minneapolis, and there was talk of, like, if you felt like you were gay, like, you should be in counseling, and you should be, you know, it's like, geez.
Yeah. Anyway, so I think it's important to talk about those people who are always around, but we just don't know about them, to the young ones, you know, that they were out, they were there. And it's not just the players that we've been talking about, even though they're so important. I mean, I would never stop talking about the music of Wayne Shorter or Joe Henderson just because they're male figures. I was so influenced and have been so influenced by both of them to this day. So I would never discount that. It's just, you know, expanding anyways.
Yeah. I want to get deeper into your music, but you have, I think, an interesting story of how you were raised. Were you born in Singapore? Is that right? Or you grew up in Singapore a little bit? How did that work?
Yeah, I was born in Singapore. My dad was British and my mom is Swedish, and my dad got a job with Westinghouse. And so they moved him to Singapore, and he was working for the office that was actually in Calcutta, India. So he was going back and forth to India a lot.
Wow.
We went to India a few times. And so yeah, we traveled all over the world. My dad had that privilege, which was really wonderful. And I went to these British schools there because it was, sadly, that's a very colonized environment.
Right.
That residue is still very much present in Singapore. It's a very interesting and strange place. I look back upon the time and, the interactions that certain groups of people, like British people, like my family, had with the people who actually lived on that island, lived in that place for all of time. So it's very strange, and I hope things have shifted a bit. I did see something recently about Singapore on Amnesty International. I did see something about how they're trying to change the laws so there won't be any more public caning and all these kinds of things, and reducing some of the marijuana laws, because if you smoke or have any marijuana, you really are in jail for a while.
Wow.
And you can also your sentence can include some form of caning in or outside of the incarcerated position that you're in, and it's insane. So yeah, there's that. And we were there until I was like 7, and we moved to Atlanta, and I lived there. And my parents split, and we moved to this neighborhood that was in the inner city of Atlanta, and so it was like a 5% white place. And so that's where I learned about Black music. All my friends taught me about Black music there. And I feel like learning about R&B and gospel music and rap music and all the stuff that was happening during that time in Atlanta, the early sort of outcast community, that band and those people. And it really taught me a lot about the music. And also my friends were like, you're not Black. You can't, like you'll never understand what we've gone through, but it's cool. You can hang out with us, it's like that.
It's a good lesson to learn as a young kid.
It was great. I mean, I loved it so much. And I was so angry when my mom moved to Texas, which was harder for me because everyone made fun of me. And like, I was wearing all my like baggy clothing and,
your inner city Atlanta clothes. Yeah.
Trying to wear like FUBU shirts and stuff. Like, I can't believe what I was wearing. But then everyone there was like, you can't wear that. And I went through sort of an identity crisis.
Wow.
But yeah, and then everyone was white. So that was different. So
did the music that you encountered in Singapore last with you? Is that something that you go back to ever? Like, I think about Augie is 7 years old now, my son, and it's like he's experienced so much musically in this time. Like, I can see how these are formative years for him. Yeah,
I think that it is for people like Augie who isn't moved. I mean, we traveled so many places. I think I was so overwhelmed by all of the things that I've experienced. And I have that same kind of quality now where I will go to a place and I adapt so easily. Like, I could just adapt within moments of being in a place. And a lot of other people aren't like that. But, and I'm not saying Augie wouldn't be that way because he totally probably would, but what I'm saying is like, I forgot a lot of that stuff, because there were just more things to pay attention to. Yeah. So I would just like go right inside of where I was then. So I was in Singapore, and most of the music we were listening to was American music. My parents, they're listening to rock music and R&B and all that kind of stuff. But in school, in Montessori school, we did some of the bell, used all these bells, and it was mostly like nursery rhymes and stuff, that kind of stuff,
Montessori's all like project-based learning and responsibility, and you have to put things back away after you use them, and it's like we wanted to put our kids through Montessori, and then when we got here, it was like there wasn't anything like that. I mean, there was a small one, but they got milk, and they were like, Augie's allergic to dairy, and so they were like, guaranteed somebody's gonna spill milk in Augie's face, guaranteed it's gonna happen. And we were like, all right, well,
no, not doing it. I'm sure you already provide with how awesome you and Jana are, like an amazing environment for Augie. You probably have your own Montessori environment in your home already.
I don't know, man. If you took a look at their playroom, you might disagree. It's we just finally cleaned it the other day. I was like, this is ridiculous. We got to throw away half of these toys.
Well, hey, that's a big part of Montessori is just being free to do whatever you want. Yeah. So yeah.
And they're definitely that. They're definitely creative, and they're It's like when they're bored, it's like, here's some stuff to play with, you know.
That's so
Occasionally
cool.
it's like, here's a phone, play some games, but for the most part, we're keeping them creating things, you know. Go
Yeah.
play some
But
piano, go.
I think everyone's different though, you know, like some people have really good recollections of that time and other people don't. Like for me, I don't, because it's mostly like visual heat. I remember the heat. I remember the pool. I remember the bottom of the pool. I remember the dogs and the water and screaming and like, swings and all of those visual kind of memories for
Yeah.
me more so than, and then the music, it was really like my parents' music, what my parents were listening to.
Right. And they listen to American music. Were they listening to the Beatles and stuff like that too?
Yeah, my dad, huge Beatles fan. He loved like Santana. He loved Steve Miller and Chicago, Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, cool. That sounds like my dad too. It's big into Chicago and cool. So moved to Texas. When did you get to Chicago? Was that for school?
That was, I went to college in Arlington, Texas, which is a little small school under the umbrella of UT, but it's in Arlington, so between Dallas and Fort Worth. And I got a psychology degree there, but I was also connected to the music program and like played in the groups. And then I ended up getting a music degree because my advisor was like, oh, you have a lot of music classes. You could just stay here one more year and get a music degree too. So I did that. And then I applied to graduate programs in Northwestern, accepted me to the PhD program. And I was like, okay. And then I got into 2 other programs and I just decided to go to Northwestern because I might as well get the PhD if I'm going to go to school. And
was that PhD program, you applied for that right out of your undergrad?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I applied to the graduate program and then I wasn't expecting to be accepted to, the whole PhD program. It was just a sort of vague graduate program. And I was expecting them to offer me the master's. But I don't even think they had that program, actually, a master's program yet. And the advisor there, Richard Ashley, ended up being my advisor on my dissertation. And they were all really excited about me. And they wanted me to come there. And it's like, oh, Chicago. So we moved up there. Yeah.
Is that because of your like psychology and music backgrounds? Is that what they found interesting about your previous studies?
Yeah, because it was a dedicated music cognition program where people had these labs. There are various labs where people were studying different concepts in the field. Like my advisor was really interested in timing. So he was studying timing of Miles Davis solos at the time that I was applying. And then Bob Yurdigan was there and he was really interested in Partimenti, which is this sort of lick-based way of learning tunes and patterns in the Baroque period of music, even prior to the Baroque period of music, all these Italians and plus Mozart, that's how he learned.
Cool.
So he wrote this old book it's called A Classic Turn of Phrase, and it's about Partimenti, and he's amazing. And he really helped me to understand perception. And then there was Elizabeth Margulis who came there. She started getting interested in expectation. Like, what does it mean when we expect something to happen in music versus then what happens when we experience the thing and we don't get what we expected. And then there was this other side of the school, the auditory neuroscience part, where there's Nina Kraus, who's really interested in how musicians are basically creating a carbon copy of the sound that's out there in the world inside of their neurological systems inside the ear, which is really fascinating. Like if you go and record what's happening in there inside the inner ear, it will be almost exact carbon copy if you're a musician of what's going on out there, from the most inane sounds like toothbrushing. I remember one time she did a study and she was studying musicians and how they represent sound neurologically and physically in here. And the sounds she chose were like toothbrushing, baby crying. There was like an orgasm sound. It was crazy. And then
so is this recollection of those sounds, or it's like while you're hearing them? Yeah,
while you're hearing, and we had the cap on, the whole EEG cap.
Okay.
There's like the jelly and there's EEGs on our foreheads and all over our heads. And she's studying, how do we react neurologically to these sounds? What's the timing of the reaction? And then also we're rating, like, how pleasurable is this sound to you? Is this pleasing on a scale of whatever from 1 to 10, 10 being the most pleasing, 1 being, I can't stand the sound. How pleasing is it to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was,
And I still, like, when I hear babies cry, I still go into dad mode. I'm like,
yeah.
no matter where I am, I'm like, is that my kid? No, it's not. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like I can be by myself, but it's like, it's that innate biological response to
Right.
kid
It
crying,
really is.
which is probably why it drives so many people crazy on planes and stuff. Cause it's like, we're wired to do something about it,
Right. I know. And sometimes
so we don't get eaten by lions or something.
right. Sometimes they just need to cry it out.
Well,
Hard for us and everyone else on the plane. But I mean, if you're understanding, then
yeah. There's various different philosophies on cry it out too, in the parenting community.
right. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I was at my friend's house for dinner and they were talking about sleep training,
Yep.
which has happened a long time ago, but when they were sleep training, they moved since, but now they had a one bedroom and they stayed in their living room so they could sleep train their baby, and they slept in, but they did it, and it was so funny because they were thinking like, okay, he seems to be going to sleep on his own. He's not crying. Should we go back in the bedroom? Like, when do we go back in the bedroom and put him back, in the crib next to it? Like, when is the right time? And so they just waited and waited till it's definitely, he's definitely trained,
Yeah. It's crazy. That's a crazy, we talked about doing that and we never did. And so the boys, like, they still end up in our bed every night, like I was talking to a friend of mine and he was like, you guys aren't going to sleep train. He's like, dude, get ready, man. He's like, they're going to be 10 years old. They're still going to be in your bed, man. It's like, you better get a king size bed. I was like, oh. So we still have a queen size bed and I just sometimes have to leave, or Jana has to leave,
Aww.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And
they're
the dog.
very sweet though, and it's like, how long are they gonna be in the grand scheme of things? It's like, it's nice to snuggle,
It is nice. Yeah, it is totally nice.
Except when they have colds and they're like coughing in your face all night.
No.
Oh yeah, you're not. I mean, it's like when you're. It's like, this is totally stuff I never talk about on the podcast. When your kid is sick, it's like somebody in real life throws up. It's like you run away. You know what I mean? And like when it's your kid, you're like catching it with your hands. I don't want it to go on my couch.
Right.
It's just like a totally different human experience.
It's so good. I'm glad you're talking about it. I was saying to my friends, sometimes like people, we need to be reminded of people's real lives sometimes when they're professional musicians. Like, I was talking to those same people and annoyed about how there weren't changing rooms in some of the venues,
Yep.
Like, there needs to be changing rooms in the venues for people who have babies,
Absolutely.
And who need to take their babies to the sound check. I've been seeing that a lot lately.
Yep.
Parents, just musician parents, both of them, and they can't afford a babysitter for the sound check. So they bring the baby to the sound check and the baby's like hanging out, and where do they change their baby?
Totally.
So,
and like, where do they breastfeed? And like Jana dealt with this. We did a little tour when Augie was a baby, and we always did this Door County run that was like a week or two long, where we played almost every day. And we were like, we'll try 4 or 5 days this time. And Augie was a baby, and we had him at every gig. And the rest of the band would be like eating tacos on the break, and Jana's like back behind the stage, breastfeeding, taking care of Augie, making sure he's fine. I mean, it was like not the most ideal. And I think it really kind of made her go like, I don't want to do that. It's like, and it's not that she doesn't want to perform, but it was like the pressure of having to both handle that and be worried about like who's watching him, and are they paying attention, and are they really, handling him the way that she would want.
Yeah. I mean, luckily I feel that there are a lot of women like Jana who feel there is a Women in Jazz Mothers podcast, I think, that's came out. And there are so many mothers in jazz. So I hope she's included in that too. And so she can tell her stories, because I think it's really valuable to include people like Jana in that way, so she can tell her story and other people can relate and help each other with this, with these things, so that we don't just like, well, I'm just going to stop, because that's sadly what happens to some people, is that they're like, I can't do this and I'm just stopping. I'm just going to dedicate, which is a beautiful thing also, to dedicate your life to being a parent. And I know Jana's also like performing just as much, and she's
Yep.
badass. And but there's a community of people, is what I'm trying to say, that can help and that have resources available. And I think that's so important right now. And we haven't done that in our music. We haven't done that. And they've been there all along. Jerry Allen, was a mother during her performance career. There's been so many people.
Yeah. Alice Coltrane.
Alice Coltrane. Yeah, exactly. So I'm glad that's finally happening in like a very concerted way, intentional.
Yeah, yeah, it's been it's been tough for Jana, I think, getting back. It's not like she ever left, but it was like there was such this period where it's just like when you're a parent of really young kids, it's like you're under a rock almost, and you like a couple of years go by and you wipe your eyes and you're like, whoa, wait, what happened? Who got elected president? What the hell? It's it's really like there's so little that you can handle especially if your kids don't sleep. Like our kids just never slept well, and so we were always sleep deprived. I was up at 4, 3 with the boys. We took turns getting up with them, and it's just like it was hard to maintain that energy of forward. It's like you have to always be forward thinking when you're a musician. Like I'm planning this tour and it's got to be planned, months in advance, or I'm planning this recording project, or I'm booking this gig, and it's like these things they require foresight, and when you're just trying to survive the moment, it's really hard to think ahead. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't exactly, but I can relate. I can see how that must be so challenging, and it's so important for everyone to talk about it, because I think there's so many people who are like, I can't do that, but there's people that can help, like you all, who can share stories and share strategies. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, totally.
You don't know how to do this? This is how you do this. Like I have no idea how to do this. Here you go. Here's a way that we did this, and you can take it or leave it.
Yeah, totally. Those stories are valuable. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. I wanted to talk about music making. So we left off with you getting your PhD at Northwestern, doing all this really cool stuff. I assume that you were like getting connected in the scene at that time, playing like. It seems like you took an interesting path to becoming like a prolific artist, because we were like, I majored in psychology, and then they were like, you could major in music too. It's like that wasn't you didn't go to school thinking like that's what I'm going to do. I would assume. So when did you become like, I'm going to chase this artistry thing as a saxophonist and composer?
Yeah, it was when I moved to New York. Actually, I got my PhD, and then I was teaching a bit in Chicago for DePaul University. Taught a music in the brain class for graduate students, a seminar class. They asked me to do that right out of, I was ABD, which means all but dissertation.
Yep.
And a friend of mine, Jackie, she was teaching there and said, we need someone to teach this seminar course. Can you do it? And I was like, yeah. So I did that for like 5 years. Even after I moved to New York, I taught it on Skype before Zoom. Wow. And I also took over some theory classes for Jeff Bradfield at Columbia College, and I taught at Northwestern ear training. It was a lot. So I thought to myself, wow, this is crazy. Just being adjunct at 3 different universities. Whoa. Yep. So I stopped doing that, and I really kind of went through a little thing with myself, and I really wanted to write music and dedicate my life to it. So I saved all this money, and I moved to New York. I'm like, well, if there was a place to do it, it would be here. So I did it, and I moved here, and I had to struggle a bit, and I had these sort of odd jobs teaching music together, actually little baby music classes.
Oh, cool.
Here when I first moved here, which was beautiful, which is when I became more sympathetic to like the plight and struggles of parenting, because it was so close. I saw it, and beautiful thing. But then, I decided, I also then went through this thing and I quit all that. And then now I just do the new school teaching thing and really spend more of my time practicing and composing. So it took a little while for me to get to this place. And there's definitely it's not without its complications. Like most people go to school and they make all these connections, and you see them kind of go through their life. And it's a very linear process of being connected with those folks, and they play with those folks, and they're kind of connected always in this way. And I feel like I'm always kind of, pushing and trying to make those connections and be like, I'm genuine, I'm here. And sometimes I feel a little bit left out of that linear thing, but in other ways I kind of like it because I'm kind of weaving in and out of the thing.
Yeah.
And I still have all my connections to the academic world, which is beautiful. And I'm, in touch with these really interesting people, like my friend who's a neuroscientist up here at UConn Stores, and just, talking to him on the phone. And what are you working on? And I'm working on, these oscillator models that, mimic the behaviors of the brain. And I'm like, wow, I'm so lucky to be having this conversation with you. And I wouldn't have that if I just, if I went to music school. So there's, pros and cons.
Yeah, totally. So do you then fund some of your projects through grant writing? Is that something that you're actively pursuing?
Yeah, absolutely. The last round with Portals and then this record that isn't out yet, but will come out next year probably, was funded by the Jerome Foundation. We were supposed to do a bunch of touring, but pandemic. And instead I made these 2 records. And then I did some other things. I bought some gear, and it was a very good grant that I received. And then this year it's been the Jazz Gallery offered me a fellowship to be the composer. They do this composer fellowship once a year with one person that the board chooses. And I was very lucky to receive that. So that's been this year of me writing for that music, which will premiere in December. Cool. And then CMA, I was able to get this grant last year, which was pushed back this year, to work with Nicole Mitchell. And we were also recording that project in December. So yeah, those have been mostly grant funded, but I have funded a lot of my stuff myself, tours and just slogging it out, like not making money on the thing and funding it, or finding a patron. I think that's a very important part of the process that I think a lot of people don't talk about is people who really love your work and who have money and who want to give their money to you so that you can do what you want to do.
Yeah,
and
totally.
Those people exist, and I'm not saying that in an effort to say we should take advantage of people. That's not what I'm saying. It's like, these people are my friends, and they become my friends, and I become very close with them, and they've supported me through the whole process, and I love them like a sister or a brother or a parent. And some people have money and others don't. And, there's ways in which we can reach out to our fans more. And I love the way that you do that. I love the way that you are on stage with people. Like, you really pull people in. Like, when I watch you perform and I hear you talk to the audience, it's a genuine, it's not like, hey, you guys are here listening to my music and I like really want you to, give me money. But no, it's genuine. Like, I really want to get to know you. I want to talk to you after the show. I want you to understand where my music's coming from. I want to keep in touch with you. Yeah. Because I want our relationship to burgeon. I want our relationship to grow. And I think that's so important these days because, everything's so,
yeah,
there's so much going on, and we got to keep in touch with the people who care about our music and find our supporters.
Totally. I think some of those people too, like they love music and maybe studied music themselves and just decided to go a different way because they wanted that financial security. And now they want to have a piece of somebody creating art, that they love. I think that's a beautiful thing. I work with somebody in Minneapolis like this, and I put on a show, like a album release party at a theater in South Minneapolis with my orchestra, and I had like a 4-piece choir, and I flew in Toki Wright from Boston, and I flew a harjander in from Jamaica to play with my band, and I had like I had a videographer and a photographer and a lights guy and a sound guy.
Wow.
And it was like, we sold, it was like $35 tickets or something. We sold 330 tickets, something like that. But I still, after all of that, would have lost money if I hadn't had this guy, Tim Pharisee, who's been a fan of my music for a long time, who paid for the flights for the 2 guest artists to fly in and seated the show with $1,000. It's like I still would have not made it, even with the success of like nearly selling out this theater at $35 a ticket, which is like, it's kind of mind blowing. It's like, man, I still didn't get there. I mean, it's like, it's a 20-piece band, of course. So like,
Right.
I always like the projects I come up with are too big, probably. So it's like, but you
No.
need somebody like that to. And I was going to ask too about portals, like when you started to think about funding that project, how did you frame it when you wrote the grant? Like what did you tell a story about the inspiration behind the music? Did you talk about how you wanted to include strings and you hadn't done that before? Like what, or I don't know if you hadn't done that before, but that you wanted to include strings with your quintet. How did you frame that in the grant writing process?
Yeah, I basically wanted to talk through how we connect with our ancestors in the music. And they can be people who were related to you by DNA, or they can be people who were inspired by you. And I thought about that word portal and how we can create these portals of communication with those people, not like the portal that you use to go online. But yeah, the other portal, the sort of like, yeah, the portal of communicating with our ancestors. And I spoke about that and how it was so important to me to be able to do that in order to define my own identity and where I came from, and to tell that story of my own uniqueness. And I mean, more formally and specifically, I wanted to hire string players who were really wonderful improvisers instead of just a section. And not saying people in section can't improvise, but I wanted to put the section together myself and choose the people who I really loved, to forego some of the technical prowess for expression. And not that expression doesn't require technical prowess, but I wanted more focus on the improvising, and more focus on the texture of the strings, and trying to do this a different way. And although I love, Charlie Parker with strings and all these musicians with strings, I love all those records so much. It wasn't what I was trying to do. And so I wanted to incorporate this texture in a new way. And I explained that in my proposal. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And now you've worked with Marquise on a couple of records too, more than two?
Yeah, 2. And this will be, we're recording in December, so it'll be the 3rd one. Mm-hmm.
So it feels to me like your chemistry is palpable, kind of jumping off the record. Can you talk about developing that relationship with Marquise? Did you guys meet when you were both in Chicago? Is he in New York now too?
We met in Chicago, and Marquise is an enigma. He moves around so much, but also, as you may know, he has a position at Berklee College of Music.
Oh, I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah, he has a position at Berklee College of Music, which is, I think he's starting his 2nd year just now, this new semester, trumpet faculty. And so I believe Marquise, I wouldn't want to tell his story for him, but I'm pretty sure he has a place in Boston, and then he might have a place here. And he also owns a place in Chicago for sure. Okay. And so he's traveling around a lot, as we all know. And yeah, I mean, I always love Marquise, who has a you also have an incredible trumpet sound that is unparalleled. Like both of you, it's just, wow. Just to be able to have that, that subtone quality that I feel like I'm always like, that textural depth that is, I think it's just so difficult on the trumpet, but like easier on this flugelhorn maybe, but you both get it so beautifully on the trumpet. And I had played with him a little bit in some projects in Chicago, and just got to know him and really love him as a person, which I think is also very important to me, to be involved with him as a person, as a human being.
Right.
And wanted to work with him, and he's just such a wonderful presence all around. So, and I love playing with him. I love improvising with him and working on playing together, which I know he really loves to do, improvising together. That's been really fun. I do that a lot on that record with him, the Heartonic record.
Yeah. Cool. Portals. I've been listening to Portals a bunch lately, and it's awesome. I don't even know how to put it. I was thinking about like what can I say about it that actually has substance, but I don't even know. It's just like, that's the stuff that I love, It's like I hear it and it's just like, it's like the stars. I don't know how to describe it. It's like listening to it. It's like, I always picture things when I listen to music too, so I just like visually see the music while I'm listening in different ways, or hear conversations. I used to fall asleep listening to like Roy Hargrove trade fours with Antonio Hart, and like I would hear, as I was falling asleep, I'd be hearing a conversation in words, rather than, you know what I mean? So it's just like I have I have that experience listening to your music,
Thanks.
and whatever. So I don't know how to.
That means a lot.
Not to gush too much,
No,
I'm wearing my My Tree T-shirt too.
It truly means so much to even just know that people are listening and getting something out of it. That's
Yeah, totally. It's all any artist really can ask for. It's like that's a good reminder too to artists to go like, oh yeah, this does mean something to people. I think it's easy to lose sight of that.
Definitely, because music is such a personal endeavor where we'll go and listen on our headphones and no one is there with us, and how can we possibly share that with someone else? And many people just don't share. I haven't been good about sharing that, but I'm getting better. Like I listened to a friend's record the other day and I texted him, I'm like, finally sat down and listened to your whole record and it's fucking awesome. So I think we should all be so much better about that. I think there can be sometimes a complex as a musician to be like, well, I'm doing my thing and you're doing your thing. I mean, we're all out here trying to do this thing.
Yep.
And it's so small, this stuff is so little. And every time you reach out and just say something like that, it can help change someone's day, which is that's
totally.
What the thing is. Like we just wake up every day and we go, okay, today, what do I got to do today to get through today? About that right now. And I'm not trying to change the world. I just want to be able to put my shoes on and feel calm and make people smile and have a good energy around me.
Yeah, totally. So what would you say to if there's a young person that wants to make a new album of music, maybe somebody that hasn't done it before, what kind of advice would you give a person like that?
Yeah, I would say I think for me it always takes a long time to frame what I'm doing and to take a lot of notes. I'm very intentional about sort of taking stock of all of the pieces that are going into the concept of an album or a concept of a book of music and how everything sort of fits together in these specific ways. So I'm really interested in the shape of it. And sometimes I will draw visually what I'm going for or take a lot of notes. It's a lot of free form note taking and drawing and colors and textures and what is it going to feel like and how do I want people to feel when they're listening to the music and where their mind's going to go and just putting myself in other people's shoes and that kind of building for me, and then going and sitting down and figuring out harmonically and rhythmically what I'm wanting to
how
do.
long is that process, that initial process? Does that last a week where you're like, I'm going to ruminate on this? Is it longer? Is it like you're thinking about it and then you're actually actively writing things out? Or
right. I feel like, it's a back and forth for me, but it takes a lot. Like right now, this thing that I'm doing, Portals #2 for my grandmother's poetry, that's what I'm working on now. It's been taking a long time, over a year or a year and a half or something like that for me. Because this has been difficult. It's the first time I'm going to include more words and singing on a record that I would say is more of my jazz style record. And so I'm really trying to be, more intentional about the whole thing. And there's going to be poetry and there's going to be rapping and spoken word. So there's all of that. That's taking me a long time to go in there and do that. And it's just music has become something so different now for people. And I'm saying that because I've noticed just more specifically, there's shorter tracks, for example, smaller tracks. And I'm used to, 13-minute tracks. And then someone wrote on Twitter the other day, whoever's coming out with tracks that are 13 minutes or 12 minutes, you don't know what you're doing anymore. And I had this long discussion. This wasn't the other day. This was maybe 6 months ago. But I was like, wow, everything is so different. But then, you could hold strong and do your thing. I'm like, no, I'm going to come up with a track that's 12 minutes. But then you think, well, who are the people who will listen to that? But there are people who will listen to that. So you kind of go back and forth and think about shaping and everything. But
you think about when the records came out and it became all right, you got to make your song under 3 minutes and 20 seconds or whatever. And it's did Duke Ellington not make art because he was making songs that were 3 minutes and 20 seconds? I mean, I do think that too. My songs are all my big band charts are 12 minutes long,
No, I know.
15 minutes long. It's
in
the age of streaming though, I do think about this a little bit. Like,
Yeah.
how can I maximize? Do I break up my songs into chunks so people? It's like so I can get more plays. You know, I don't know. It's
Right.
like,
I know you don't really know how people are ingesting the music, and a lot of people in the mainstream world are really just listening to singles. They're not even listening to albums, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. That's the perception of what's happening. But when I talk to young people, a lot of young people are like, no, man, I'm listening to albums.
Albums? That's
You
so
know what I
good
mean?
to
Like,
hear.
it does make me feel like, okay, we're going to be all right. You know, it's like
I
there's still
love-
people that are digging it.
I love hearing that because I am that person too. I will sit and listen to a record, you know,
Yeah,
many times.
Yeah.
And I'm not normally a single person. The only time I really listen to singles is when my friends come out with singles. And I'm like, okay, I gotta listen to the single. And yeah, but it's not normal for me to listen to a single.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I was just listening to Katie Ernst and Dustin Lorenzi they have like an indie project now, kind of like
Yeah, it's
rock
so
oriented.
good.
And I just
listened to
listened
it.
to their single that was released ahead of the record. But yeah, same thing. I'm majority of the time I listen to a whole album, and it's just like, I don't know. That's how I trained myself to listen, I guess. But multiple times through before moving on to the next. I've been listening. I'm honestly like, for me, I'm now in the gym 5 days a week in the mornings, real early before the kids wake up, and it's been Jesse Volume 3, the Jacob Collier record, which is just outrageously cool.
That's
And it's
awesome.
over and over and over every morning, and I'm like, I know this is gonna get into my music somehow. You know, it's
Yeah, no, I'm with you on the album listening. I was just disappointed to see someone tweet that out and like people be like, yeah, that's true. And I was like,
yeah.
oh, what are you doing?
Yeah. I mean, it depends. It's like, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? Are you somebody who is trying to really play the Spotify game and like build up a whole bunch of followers and get millions of plays per year so that you have some passive income? It's like, if that's your goal, then like, yeah, I mean, you should do what works there. And there's a place for that and place for music for function. And, you know, but if you're an artist and you're going to be true to the things that you're drawn to, it's like, you can't play by those rules. And I see both sides of that. Not to both sidesism everything, but I can see, you know.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to be true to yourself and your vision, what you hear and how you hear music and how you experience music, and put it out like that and don't falter, you know, because someone's gonna like it. And more often than not, a lot of people are going to like it. A lot of people are going to dig it if it's genuine and it's coming from straight from your heart and from the vision that you've cultivated for the years that you've been doing something, even if it's different than your norm, you know, because I tend to do that. I'll put out a project and it's very different from the other stuff that I have out. Although some people have been telling me lately, like, oh, I can always tell it's your music, which is really cool to hear. But yeah, I'm one of those people who like has these, you know, 3 different projects going on, and I'm switching back and forth between them all.
Yeah, I love that. I'm doing that too myself, and
yeah,
I've always been drawn to these other kinds of things, and now I say this a lot now on the podcast to basically everybody I talk to, because part of I'm talking to a lot of people that are doing that have these different things, and they've found a way to kind of put them together and turn them into something that's really potent, and that is kind of like encompassing your wholeness as an artist, you know.
Because honestly, with how small our industry is, what else can we do? You know, we can't rely on the one thing, you know, and that's why I think it's important to be flexible as an artist, because, you know, we're out here hustling. If someone asks you, can you play on this pop record? Maybe it's in your best interest to learn how to do that, or to put some energy into it, even though it's, you know, not your, you know, main thing. But maybe all these things are your main thing. And it's not, it's like, can you play, you know, an open solo over this, you know, collection of noise? Yeah, I can. You know, I've worked on that. You know, it's my main thing. Just like playing over these changes is my thing, or just like singing over this song that I wrote is my thing. So yeah, I'm so tired. I'm kind of tired of people being like, well, you have to choose one thing and follow that. And I'm like, well, those are all my one thing. That's my thing. The one thing that I do, that's me.
Doing the music that I'm drawn to is my one thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever that is.
Yeah, because honestly, how you make a living is all of those things. That's how you make a living doing this thing.
Yeah.
Unless you're really a mega name.
Right. And you may find too that you end up loving some of that stuff, and that you get a lot out of it.
Yeah.
And that it informs the other music you make eventually.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's certainly been my experience.
Mm-hmm.
So you said, sorry.
So, no, I was just going to say one more thing is there's a lot of jazz musicians who end up playing for pop musicians and going on these world tours. And it's so cool to see that because I don't know, jazz music is so hard. And so learning this music takes a lot of energy and focus. And I think we work quickly. So when someone hires you in that context and you already have all the stuff memorized and have all of your horn lines figured out and you don't need any sheet music, it's because of the training we had doing all this other stuff. Like, oh yeah, I memorized this Clifford Brown solo. Totally. I can do this. I can do this other thing. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So you mentioned that you've got a Portals Volume 2 coming out. Is there anything else we should be keeping our eye out for? We're going to link all your stuff in the show notes for people that are listening.
Oh, thanks. I'm coming out with a record next year sometime, which will be, I have this project called Alula, which is sort of my more electronic world of music and still instrumental music. But that record will feature myself and Chris Tordini on bass and Val Janti on turntables and samples.
Cool.
And Taishan Sori on drums.
Oh, yeah.
And then my friend Qasim Naqvi, who's an incredible musician and composer himself, but he's playing modular synth on 2 of the songs. And he's also an amazing drummer and just an incredible human being and composer and everything. And I met him actually through we were label mates on New Amsterdam Records. So we met that way and now have played a few shows together. And he plays drums in those shows. But anyway, yeah, that'll come out next year and that'll be like Alula, the second Alula album. And that record is focused on people who have been held in captivity and who persevered in these like very wildly successful ways, like Galileo, for example. Mm-hmm. These 2 women who were burned at the stake in the 13th century, whose names were Agnes and Huguette. They were French. And my friend Keith Lamar, who's on death row right now in the state of Ohio, who I've been involved with his campaign and trying to, free him from this ridiculous incarceration. And another friend of mine, Jaleel Muntaqim, who was an ex-Black Panther, who was in prison for almost 50 years, maybe 48 years, was released in 2020 and is now just doing his thing. And he's written so many books and just kind of a hero of mine. Sandra Bland and Joyce Ann Brown, who was a woman who was incarcerated for some time, but then she created these programs. She's passed now, but she created these programs for people in the West Coast who were, out of jail and needed help in the world. Yep. Because that's been such a horrible thing for people to experience. And she was a hero of mine for doing that. So that's the sort of aspect of the album for me. I've been really involved with that idea of helping incarcerated people. Personally, my uncle was incarcerated for a long time, and he lives in Sweden. And I've just seen, he's an amazing person and human being, but I've seen how the system sort of destroyed his life. And I thought I would love to do something personally that makes a statement about this aspect of my personal life.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking out the time to talk and hang. It was great to catch up.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, totally. Hope we cross paths again soon.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
All right.